Hi, my name is Sherry Spellwoman, and this is my week 7 assignment on critical thinking strategies, and I'm going to talk about modeling a strategy that I learned about called Think Alouds. The topic I have selected is English Learning Arts for grade 3, and I'm going to be talking about character traits analysis. Students will need guidance to understand what character traits are and how to think critically as they read a story to analyze character traits and determine what makes them tick. I'm going to talk to you about 3 assumptions I have and 3 branching options I've chosen for the teaching process. My first assumption is vocabulary. Most third graders have a simple vocabulary. They're familiar with basic emotions such as sadness, happiness, and anger, but they need to build their vocabulary to include more complex words that define character traits, such as compassionate, independent, or stubborn. My second assumption is outside versus inside. Another issue that younger students have is a difficulty understanding the difference between what a character looks like on the outside, such as their physical features, and what a character is like on the inside, which describes personality traits. My third assumption is emotions versus traits. Another assumption I have is that many students are confused about the difference between emotions and character traits. Teachers need to help students understand the difference between how a character acts at a certain moment in a text and how they tend to behave most of the time. So, my first branching option is a group discussion. I will moderate a group discussion to define and review character traits. I'll ask students for a definition of character traits. Some examples are a combination of different qualities that define a character, such as what they think, how they feel, how they talk, what actions they take, what their personality's like based on the choices they make. I'm looking for words that describe characters' personality or qualities that make them who they are. In other words, how would you describe that character to someone else? Then I'll be asking students for examples of character traits. They can give examples, and I will also refer them to the character traits anchor chart in the classroom to help them expand their vocabulary. We will also talk about how to differentiate between physical traits and personality traits. I will help students understand the difference between the physical traits, which are what we can see with our eyes. When young students are asked to describe a character, they often describe these physical features. Character traits are what we mean by personality traits, which have to do with what the character's like on the inside, what makes them tick. They are things we infer from evidence such as the character's thoughts, words, feelings, and actions. I will refer students to the character traits outside versus inside anchor chart. We will also be discussing how to differentiate between a character's emotions and their character traits. I'll help students understand the difference between how a character acts or feels at a certain point in the text versus how we think that character behaves most of the time. I'll ask students to think of a time when they were sad about something and share it with a partner. Next, I'll ask the students if they would describe themselves as a sad person and allow some time for this discussion. I will also refer students to the character emotions versus traits anchor chart. The branching option number 2 is the read aloud with think aloud. Critical thinking is an intellectual process that requires some form of modeling when it is taught to students. Think aloud is a type of modeling where teachers verbalize their inner thought processes so that students can understand how the process works. This strategy makes the thought processes transparent for the students. When a teacher interrupts a lesson to provide a think aloud, they're offering insights in the form of observations, inferences, analyses, or problem-solving techniques that demonstrate critical thinking skills in real time, in a real example. These models need to be public and explicit to be best understood and are most meaningful when they are current and or relevant. We will read a book aloud as a class that I've selected based on interesting characters for students to analyze, such as Know David. As we read, I will model think alouds for character analysis by interrupting the story to ask myself questions such as, what words best describe David's actions in this scene? How do I think David feels about this situation? What does this say about David's personality? And I will answer my own questions in real time to the students. I will also ask students to engage in think alouds by interrupting the story to ask them the same type of questions, such as, why do you think David did that? What do you think motivated David to behave that way? How do you think the other characters feel about David's actions? How do you feel about David's behavior? How would you describe David's feelings at this point in the story? Do you think this is typical behavior for David? What words best describe David at this moment? And allow time for them to discuss this. My third branching option is the Character Traits Graphic Organizer worksheet with a partner. I will pair students up with partners to complete a worksheet on character traits. Each student will fill out their own worksheet, but the partners will select the character they wish to analyze and provide 4 character traits that describe them and provide evidence from the text. I will walk around the classroom to observe and assist the students. Remember to remind students that character traits are based on what a character is like on the inside, not the outside. Remind students to describe the inside of the character based on what the characters do, say, feel, and think. Remind students to use complex vocabulary. Remind students that character traits reflect a character's personality, not just an emotion they feel at one moment in time. And see my attachment for modifications and differentiated instruction. Thank you for listening to my presentation on modeling critical thinking with a Think Aloud strategy.